a biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
In an election year, there are lots of issues that will be competing for the attention of political candidates and leaders and those of us who will be voting. So, those issues with a biblical, Christian, ethical foundation sometimes run the risk of getting lost in the energetic issues of an election campaign. The very serious issue of the de-gendering of Australian society is going to be front and centre, though. It'll be the focus of a number of Christian lobby organisations, and one of those who's at the forefront of this particular issue is Kirralie Smith, who leads Binary. She's really a courageous woman standing up against the rampant campaign to de-gender Australian society. Back with us. Hey, Kirralie, welcome back to 2020.
Happy New Year, Neil. It's great to be with you.
Hey, Kirralie, the risk of losing another generation of kids to what I know you describe as a damaging fad. This election's pretty important, isn't it?
Look, it's extremely important, and we're seeing the worldwide phenomenon now, with Trump taking office, that people are not accepting gender ideology anymore. We want safeguards for our children, and we need female sex-based rights. And so in the USA, the UK and other countries, this is happening, and whether our politicians like it or not, this will be an election issue for 2025.
Now, when we talk strategy, and you can be as open or as closed as you want to be, Kirralie, but there is a campaign coming. Binary does have a political focus. You are going to be campaigning. Give us your insights into where you think the election can be won or lost and how significant this issue is going to be in those communities.
Look, this issue for us, we've identified that Western Sydney is a really, I guess it's the most opportune place for us to target, because Western Sydney is full of families, people of faith and, conservative people who just want to raise their children without too much government interference. And yet the Labor stronghold there is not reading the room. And people like Chris Bowen, Anne Stagley, Michelle Rowland, Ed Husick, Jason Clare and Tony Burke refuse to admit or accept that women require sex-based rights or that children need safeguarding from harmful practices, in affirmation therapies such as puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones. So we're going to specifically target all of our resources in that Western Sydney area. We will have truth trucks, we will have advertising, social media advertising, as well as letterbox drops to educate and inform the voters in Western Sydney. But this, I hope, will also go viral around Australia, and we will make sure that both major parties and other parties are talking about this issue.
Let's just keep that focus on Western Sydney for a few moments, because Western Sydney, it's going to be prominent in the campaigning of every side. You're going to be there and doing your bit too to alert people that these are challenging things that we're confronted with. There's a huge population of people in Western Sydney. It's also a stronghold for Muslim people. And I wonder whether you've got any comment on the contradiction that there is there in the government trying to bend over backwards to please Muslim minorities, when in fact this issue would be very divisive for Muslim communities.
Oh, absolutely. I'm contacted by Muslim people all the time about this issue. They're very upset that their children are being sexualised at such a young age in state schools. They're very upset that their female, their wives, their daughters are being exposed to males in their sports, particularly soccer, and in their change rooms. And they really are upset that common sense, reality, scientific evidence is not prevailing when it comes to gender ideology. And so this is an issue I've said all along, Neil. It's not a left or right issue. It's not a socio-economic issue. It's not an ethnic issue. This is just a human rights issue that men and women are different. We have different needs, and women and children require more protections in a civil society. It's not that difficult.
You mentioned something of a Trump effect and the expectation that might even change the way that campaign operators are focusing their efforts. What sort of difference do you think it will make that Donald Trump's basically swept this out of the door in the US?
Well, look, the media has already picked up on that and has been questioning particular Peter Dutton and others on it. The National Party, part of the coalition, has come out strong, saying they fully advocate for female sex-based rights and child safeguarding. Unfortunately, Peter Dutton and some of his members, such as Jane Hume, have said that it's a fringe issue, that no one's worried about it, that we're all more concerned about the cost of living. And of course, the cost of living is a major issue and we should be very focused on it, but it's not hard for the Liberal Party or others to simply say we need to get back to biological reality. Women need those sex-based rights, children need safeguarding. And so I hope that through the campaign that we will all be able to put pressure on both major parties as well as the other parties and get commitments from them. Thankfully, One Nation, the Libertarians, the United Australia Party have all said that they support common sense and women's sex-based rights and child safeguarding. So now it's just time for the Liberals to get on board. I don't think the Greens and the Labor Party will come on board.
So there's sport and there's sex-based rights. There's a whole lot of issues. Women are the big losers in all of this. How heartened are you that the Queensland government just recently made a decision to pause the prescription of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for those who are under 18?
It was absolutely a fabulous decision. And I will say I was quite stunned in the moment when I heard it. It came on the back of the disclosure that 42 children had been prescribed puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones without parental knowledge or consent from the Cairns Sexual Health Clinic. And so thankfully, the coalition government in Queensland reacted quickly and said that there'll be no new patients put on those very harmful drugs while a very stringent clinical review will take place. And that's all that is required in every state and at a federal level in Australia, because we are confident the evidence is there that these drugs are very harmful to children. If they're left with watchful waiting, they will come through puberty, which is a human right. We all have to go through it to mature from a child to adulthood. And the evidence shows us that children who struggle with their gender identity will come through it okay if they're not medically interrupted and made lifelong medical patients.
Human rights for children, women's rights, parents' rights too. We don't know how many. There might be all around Australia who've gone through that same issue around the puberty blockers, but it's clearly not just a few or a trickle. There's a real flow, and I wonder if you've got any insight or any information around parents' rights, because I know that parents have been denied in some cases the opportunity to be able to protect their children from going through these things.
Yeah, look, it's been horrifying. Our book, Devastated, How Gender Ideology is Tearing Australian Families Apart, shines a really full-on spotlight into this issue particularly, but there are governments around Australia, government agencies that are removing children or separating children from their families because parents don't want their children to go on these really harmful drugs, knowing that children can't consent to becoming sterile, to have no sexual function, high cholesterol, brain and bone development issues. And yet the governments, because of the bad laws that they've made, are empowering agencies to separate their children from their families. And unfortunately, there are thousands of accounts like that one. It's really hard to look into, to read, to hear about. But we're going to make sure that all the politicians do know about it and that they are held accountable.
So there's movement globally, given the Trump effect. There's movement in the state of Queensland and what's happening there. Let's come back to Western Sydney, a place where you say this is where the election will be won or lost. So the pressure on political parties from all sides, because I can hear you're as critical of the Liberal National Coalition as you are of the Labor Party here, because they're not giving way either. Is there some need for support for your campaign, drawing attention to these? Are you putting together some sort of a war chest? Because this is what political parties do. Political lobby groups, no doubt, need to have some dollars behind them as well. What are you hoping that there might even be some listeners to our conversation today supporting the good work of Binary?
Yeah, look, absolutely, Neil. We are campaigning. We are third-party registered campaigners for these political elections. Let me just clarify, the National Party have been fantastic. They actually have a policy platform to reinstate protections for sex in the Sex Discrimination Act. Unfortunately, their big brother, the Liberals, have not done the same thing. We have some great people in the Liberals, such as Senator Claire Chandler, Senator Alex Antic, who have been very vocal and supportive in this area. But we need Peter Dutton and other Liberals to come on board. And the only way that will happen is if we highlight the issue, we keep contacting them, we let our views be known, and we do raise this money so that we can advertise, have the truth trucks driving around and educate the voters in Western Sydney and make it an issue that has to be discussed and that they have to draw a line in the sand and make a decision on.
I think it'll be tough, won't it, for the Labor Party to change? Do you think it's as tough for the Liberal National Coalition to change direction, given that you can identify some things that are at work there in the Nationals? Is it, do you think, an impossibility that there might be a turnaround and to go along with where now the rest of the world is heading?
Look, I hope not. To me, it's a no-brainer, Neil. It's really hard for the Liberal Party to defend why they wouldn't want women's sex-based rights or child protection. This falls under their remit. It is exactly what the Liberal Party is designed for, those conservative family values. And so they just need to come back in alignment, stop worrying about what the Green or Labor voters are thinking. They're not going to win their votes anyway, but they will win the hearts of literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Australians if they actually say women need sex-based protections and children need safeguarding. It really isn't rocket science. It's not hard. I think they can do it, and I'm hopeful that with enough people communicating that message to them, they will do the right thing.
If there's change, women and children will be the biggest winners. Binary.org.au. A few years since the last federal election, and Binary has grown. Your support base is really significant these days. How do you describe the support base of Binary people?
Look, we have tens of thousands on email. We have 100,000 or so on social media. We have a really large reach. We impact other organisations as well with our resources and information. And so, this topic is being talked about a lot. When I started in 2019, it was very much a fringe issue, wasn't being discussed. But now here we are, mainstream media. Donald Trump made it, the core of his election campaign. It was one of his first order of businesses to sign into executive orders protecting women and children. And so it's just a matter of time for Australia to follow suit.
And he called it common sense, and I think that's what you're calling it too, common sense to get things right when it comes to these gender-based issues. Binary.org.au. You can become one of those 100,000 email subscribers. Keep up to date with what's happening. You might even want to contribute to that war chest for a campaign that's going to be focused on Western Sydney, but that could be where the coming election is won or lost. Binary.org.au. Kirralie Smith leads Binary. Kirralie, thank you so much for your update today on 2020.
Thanks again for having me, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.